Well, there you go, some highlights from last night's leaders' interviews, and watching that again. And with me now, Owen Jones, columnist at The Guardian, and BuzzFeed's senior political correspondent, Emily Ashton. Welcome to you both. Appointment to view for you last night, but initial estimates suggest just over 3 million people, a combined audience of just over 3 million people. So, you know, not entirely a small audience, but not as big perhaps as some would have hoped. Owen.
No, and if you compare it to the debates last year, of course, last election
Last election, yeah.
Well, thankfully, we don't have to go through these elections, these debates every year. The debates at the last election obviously had a much bigger audience. And we found out last night why David Cameron wanted to avoid a one-on-one. Firstly, because, of course, there would have been a much bigger audience. But secondly, because David Cameron was always going to underperform. He looks prime ministerial because he is prime minister. If you're prime minister, you have a prime ministerial air and authority about you. Ed Miliband, partly because of his own failure to communicate, partly because of an overwhelmingly hostile media, if he didn't turn up kind of, you know, dribbling and sobbing into himself, he would have seemed to have overperformed expectations. Well, actually, he overperformed significantly yesterday. He turned the tables on Jeremy Paxman. He was confident and assertive with the audience and passionate. So I think, yes, the polls narrowly gave it to David Cameron as the best person at the debates last night, but given the huge gulf in ratings, that was a win for Ed Miliband, I would say.
Emily, would you agree with with Owen that Cameron underperformed and Miliband overperformed?
Yeah, I think there was a definite change in style, wasn't there? So when David Cameron emerged, I mean, it was more difficult for David Cameron. He came on straight into that Jeremy Paxman interview. It was definitely the hard part of that 40 minutes. And he came in completely cold, and he was visibly nervous. And Paxman really nailed him on quite a few issues, and he didn't quite know how to answer. But then when we got to the Q&A, he was much more relaxed. He obviously does this an awful lot, but it became a bit dull even. He just knew what to say. He just wheeled out these sound bites, and by the end it became a bit of a party political broadcast. But when Ed came on, there was a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of pacing around the stage. He took people's questions with more humour, and there was laughter from the audience, there was clapping from the audience. I don't know whether that's coming second maybe helped a little bit, but there was a danger for Ed. I think maybe he overplayed his hand a little bit, and some of those lines, like hell yes, I'm tough enough.
You didn't like hell yeah, did you?
I didn't really like it.
A lot of people seem to be finding that a little bit uncomfortable this morning, don't they?
Much.
Well, Nigel Farage was one who says that for him, Ed Miliband won that, but let's listen to what he's been saying as well, criticising David Cameron's performance too.
The Prime Minister was in some trouble. He looked very nervous, and Paxman asked the kind of questions that I wanted to ask, like, can we have an admission, please, that you've doubled the size of a national debt, something that he couldn't admit to. On immigration, I thought Mr Cameron was in real trouble on the immigration numbers, and then made a series of promises for the next government in terms of limiting migrant benefits for people coming from the EU that actually would be illegal under EU law. On foreign policy, Libya, and all the other interventions, again, the Prime Minister found it very tough to defend his record.
Nigel Farage there. So let's talk a little bit about the substance. I mean, how much substance was there in there for you, Emily, in terms of policies and ideas?
There was substance. I think there was probably more on David Cameron's side. Ed Miliband seemed to get more questions about his own personal failings, according to Jeremy Paxman, and his relationship with his brother. But then David Cameron did get the personal questions on his perhaps weakness for friendships with rich people, which was probably the biggest kind of the toughest question he faced from Paxman.
Owen, you want to come in there?
Well, I suppose there's a difference between a Prime Minister's relationships with powerful individuals and the personal relationships a politician has with their families. I have no idea whatsoever what Ed Miliband's relationship with his brother or his mother have to do with the governing of this country. Those questions I thought were distinctly odd and off-putting for many people.
But is this a problem for Labour, just a few weeks out from the vote, that these questions are still being put to Ed Miliband about his personality, about his toughness and so on?
Tony Benn died last year, and he said debates should be about policies, not personalities. And the inevitability with a debate like this, which is quite presidential in format, and we're a parliamentary system. We're not used to these kinds of two leaders, focusing on them as individuals and their ability to govern. We're not used to that format. I think the danger with that is, yes, of course, you fall into the trap of not talking about the substance, like housing, like wages, like the lack of secure jobs, like falling living standards. All of those issues get knocked to one side, and instead we end up focusing on people's, psychodramas with their brothers. Maybe they have too many kitchens, or they don't eat bacon sandwiches properly. And I don't really think that's where debate should be at this country.
There's a lot to a political leader, though, isn't there? And it isn't just policy. That's the reality of it. People are interested in the character of a person. And that's what people are interested in hearing.
It is human nature, isn't it, I guess, to explore those aspects. And, a lot of people are saying that there's not much in it on the basis of the performances last night. We spoke to the polling organisation ICM earlier. They said, yes, there is a gap in the percentage reaction of people right after the debate. But, they thought that the overall, because that was a very immediate gut reaction to what had been said, it didn't represent much of a margin between the two leaders. And I interviewed also the SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, a little earlier, and she said that she thought there really wasn't very much in it.
What was most striking about it is how little there is to choose between them, and I think probably we got a powerful insight into why these two main parties enjoy between them the lowest share of their vote in living memory. People want something different, they want an alternative, and to that extent last night's debate, if you can call it that, didn't really reflect the choice that the people across the country have.
Nicola Sturgeon there. I'll just let you know that later on today we'll also be getting reaction from the Greens and Plaid Cymru to last night's leaders' interviews. Owen and Emily still with me. Talk to us about how this sets a platform for the next debates to come, especially the seven-way debate. Do you think that's going to produce anything of substance for the electorate, Emily?
I think what we really wanted and what people wanted last night was a head debate, and I think it probably would have got more numbers and more viewers if that was the case. It was called Battle for Number 10. It wasn't really much of a battle. It was a battle between a leader and Jeremy Paxman, wasn't it, rather than a battle between the pair of them. People wanted to see the two of them stand next to each other, and you wanted to case them up, you wanted to weigh them up against each other. The seven-way, you're not going to really be able to do that, are you? It's going to be competing voices, probably only going to get about 5 minutes each. It's just not going to be the same at all.
It will be chaotic. It's interesting though, in, say, Scandinavian democracies where they have often proportional representation, lots of different parties, that is the standard format. You do get seven. We've all seen Borgen, I'm sure, where you have the seven-way debate. So it's a format people are used to in other contexts. In this context, it might look a little bit chaotic, a little bit like a borathon, but I think it could be interesting because you heard Nicola Sturgeon there. Now she has to say that because the SNP at the moment are going to benefit from the total collapse of the Scottish Labour Party as things stand because of Labour's disastrous strategic decision to ally with the Tories over the referendum debate rather than having a completely separate campaign, which has just completely demolished them as a political force possibly. But nonetheless, there is obviously some truth in what she says. There isn't, for many people, enough of a distinct a choice between the Conservatives and Labour. That's why Labour actually haven't been hemorrhaging votes to the Tories. There's been very little shift between those voters. They have lost voters to parties to the left of them, the Green Party and the SNP, and they need to deal with that if in the coming weeks and the coming debates, if they're going to get them back.
Just a line from you both, if I may. Do you think, based on the evidence of last night's performances, based on what's to come, that these will make a difference to those voters who are undecided? Emily?
I think people will think of Ed Miliband a bit differently and applaud his enthusiasm for last night and his confidence.
And Owen?
It'll boost morale amongst Labour activists and supporters. It'll probably give Ed Miliband a bit more confidence, and it will help disrupt the narrative that David Cameron's the unassailable, confident prime ministerial candidate, whilst Ed Miliband's weak and a loser. I think it will re-inject a bit of zest into Labour's campaign, which otherwise might have flagged. Who knows?
Well, it feels like it's underway, doesn't it? Owen Jones and Emily Ashton, thank you.